Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Adventures of FoxFoil. Today I thought would be the perfect time to do a world tour, and there are a couple of reasons for that. We have spent just under 5,000 days in this world and have completed projects all over the place, and I thought it would be fun to go back and revisit some of those builds. The other reason that I decided to do a world tour today is because we have hit 1,000 subscribers, which is amazing, and I have been promising that if we did hit 1,000 subscribers, I would be releasing a world download. And in order to provide the world download to everyone, I have created a Patreon account. And in the description down below, you can find instructions on how to access the world download, as well as a bunch of other features. But now let's get started with the world tour and taking a look at what I've created in the last 5,000 days in Minecraft. Let's get started with the world tour. And the best place to start is at the beginning, which is our starter house that we built in the first episode. And I've left it pretty much the same. I did take out a few of the banners that were hanging up in here, as well as a lot of the items in the chest, although I still have a bunch of stuff that I collected from fishing. And if we head back out, we have the barn that we built to store a lot of the wheat that we collected in the early days, as well as a little wool farm down here that I added to be able to get a bunch of white wool and I think some of the black wool, and it's still going pretty strong. And with the barn, you can see I was trying to keep up with the style that I had in the original starter house, and one that I tried to carry throughout all of the builds in this area, with possibly the exception of the iron farm, which is a little bit different than all of the other ones. And because this iron farm is in the spawn chunks, it's always running, and eventually I had to turn it off because I was getting so much iron, it was probably more than I could possibly ever use. This build is used to house our honeycomb farm, and it also works so well. Not only do I have this full chest of honeycomb, but I have another full chest in the storage over here, plus a bunch of honeycomb blocks. Maybe I should think about using some of it in a build sometime. With all of the farms in this area, it was important to get a storage room to be able to hold all of the items that we were collecting. So this storage room was built, and coming downstairs, we can see that in this storage room, I had 4 different rooms that were used, and I used different types of blocks to be able to distinguish between where different items were stored. I have been in the process of moving a lot of the different types of items that I regularly use over to the new storage room, so a lot of these chests are going to be empty. This was one of the first builds that I used the mud bricks in, and I really like this combination of the mud bricks and the stripped dark oak logs. I think it just goes really well together. This is still probably one of my favorite builds that I've done so far. Another fun build in this area is the netherwart farm, and I really liked this design as well. Just the combination of this bright red with the deep slate bricks, everything just worked really well together. Plus, harvesting all of the netherwart is a lot of fun. Replanting it all, not so much. Coming up with the design for these windmills took a lot of trial and error, and I think that the blades up at the top, this is probably the third version. Initially, it just looked very flat and static, and I was trying to get a design that looked like it was moving and not just standing still. Over here, we have this ruined castle, and originally, it was just this tower here, which was built to have our nether portal in it, and this was another project that I had a lot of fun working on. This area here has a lot of fun little details, such as these roots in the ceiling, this collapsed tunnel over here, as well as this area in the corner where a lot of dirt is coming in, and this collection of barrels over here. And then all the way down at the bottom is the nether portal, which has this combination of sculk blocks and deep slate. And turning on the shaders makes the sculk blocks stand out even more. One of the earliest big projects that I worked on was this village over here, which I went through and redid all of the buildings and put a wall around it. This little village turned out really well, and I liked the combination of the white blocks that I used, which were the calcite, the white wool, the white concrete powder, and then the spruce logs, which are stripped. And I added a couple of different types of buildings here. So we have a stables, complete with a little paddock in the back. This house over here is a little blacksmith. So we've got the forge here in the back, and then these smithing tables so that we'd have some toolsmiths that we'd be able to trade with. Now that I think about it, I'm not sure I ever traded with them. This house over here just has a bunch of beds to make sure that there would be constantly enough villagers to keep this place populated. But even with as nice as this village turned out, not all of the villagers decided to stay inside. The last place that we will visit before moving on is the villager trading hall, which I built over in this mountain here. We have this doorway which leads down to the villager trading hall, and then over here we have the door that leads to our first mob spawner and enchanting area, which is a nice little build. But once I got the villager trading hall, there wasn't much use for this area. When I was building the villager trading hall, one of the things that was a bit of a challenge was digging out this entire space without having a beacon. And it was a lot of digging and took quite a bit of time. But the end result was definitely worth the time spent digging out this area. You may also be getting a theme here of using the deep slate and sculk for the ceiling. It's just a good look. In the back, we have the villagers that we are able to trade with. Along this side, we have our librarian villagers, as well as the toolsmiths and a couple of other different trades down at the end. Over on this side, we have some clerics, as well as a bunch of masons, and the masons are who I trade with to get all of the quartz that I use. If we follow the rail around the corner, we'll be able to see the area where I go through to get all of the villagers to meet these zombies over here and get better trades with them. This is another build that I am really happy with how it turned out and wish I spent more time here because it's just really nice to be able to come in here and take a look at it. I think that's the last build in the starter area. Now let's move on to some of the builds that we have in the nether. Before we head into the nether, we can take a look at this tower, which I built to connect up the two nether portals that lead from the nether hub up to the nether roof. I think first we are going to head down and use the portal that will take us to the nether hub. Coming through the portal, we end up in our bartering room, and we have the piglins over here who we barter gold with, and then we have this automatic sorting system to be able to sort out all of the items that we are able to get through the different trades. And then if we go over here, we can head down this hallway, which will take us to the center of the nether hub. In the nether hub, I brought in some glowberries as well as the spore blossoms to create a little bit of the overworld in the nether and to be able to get a bunch of light. With the nether hub design, it is able to be expanded. So on this side, we have this tunnel that goes down to where the bartering room is. And then we have these three other points, which could also be expanded to add additional tunnels. I just haven't had anything that I've wanted to build out to yet. But if we go out this door here, there is one build that we can go take a look at. And this build is the Bastion Museum. If you are wondering why I have a museum for a bastion, when I first entered the nether, I found a bastion and went to explore it and ended up dying 5 or 6 times and never came back to that bastion at all. At least until I got better gear and a beacon. And then I came back and cleared out the bastion, and this is all that is left of the bastion. I went through and tore it all down, put this build up over it, and used some of the gilded blackstone as some nice highlights in this build. This is another build that I probably should come out and visit more often. I might need to think about some other projects we can do over here. But now, let's head up to the nether roof and we will take a look at the stronghold where I built the end portal room. The first room that we see once we come through the nether is this entry room, and I really like this room. Having these pillars here with the crying obsidian, plus putting the crying obsidian into the ceiling, all came together and really set the theme for the rest of the build. And on the outside, we have these 2 towers which frame the gateway that leads into the building. From this entry room, there are 2 ways to go down to where the end portal room is. Over here, we have a staircase that leads down on that side, and a staircase that leads down on that side, and they both end up in the same spot. So we are going to head down this one here, and you can see the crying obsidian and the purple concrete powder, which I used as the primary color throughout this build along with the deep slate. If we go down this little area, there are a few chests in here which are all completely filled with stone from when I dug out this area, and there used to be even more. There were chests all along here, chests all along this wall, and I've slowly been going through collecting and using the stone that I dug out. Continuing down the staircase, we reach this point here, which drops us down into a hallway that leads to the main staircase. And I may have set up a few diamond armored sets along the way. And then we reach the library staircase, which is got a bunch of bookshelves all the way down. And some dirt, which must be from an Enderman. That definitely was not part of the design. But once we reach the bottom of the library staircase, we can come through here and we have the final hallway that leads to the end portal room. And this may, again, be one of my favorite builds that I've done in this series. These dragons that I have here, one on each side, were my first attempts at creating statues, and I think that they worked pretty well for this area. Probably not the most realistic dragon statue that you will ever see, but I think for the space that we have, they work out pretty well. Originally, when I was building this room, I was going to use the purple candles all the way throughout. But at the time, I didn't have a good bee farm to be able to get a lot of wax to be able to craft the candles. And so I used lanterns throughout the rest of the build. And in a way, it actually turned out much better than if I had used the candles, because if we turn the shaders on, the lanterns add a really nice yellow orangish glow to the build that the candles just don't. But since we're at the end portal, let's go through and take a look at the build in the end. When we first come through the end portal, we end up in this little welcoming area that takes us around to this opening, and if we fly out, we can turn around and see the end build, which is another one that, no surprise, I really like. This project was one that took a lot of work. I think I spent a little over 50 hours getting everything built up and put into place. The obsidian towers themselves, to take those down, took about 10 hours in total. Just digging through the obsidian was a long process. One thing that I've been meaning to come back and fix are the little bedrock blocks that are left over, which I thought that the build might be able to cover up, but there are a few that ended up in the middle of these windows. And I might do a live stream in the future where I come through and take out those bedrock blocks. In each of these towers around the outside, we have the portals that will take you to the outer islands, and they were all spawned in because I went through and defeated the dragon 20 times in order to get them all to be added in. And then for these dragons that I put on the quarter towers, they're a very similar design to the ones that are in the end portal room, except that the wings are more outstretched. And then we have the dome that goes over the center of the island where the end portal is that will take us back to the overworld. And there's a little bit of space in this room, and we can't come all the way out here without taking a look at this place with the shaders on. I really like the central canal with shaders because you get the water reflections and everything, and it just adds to the whole atmosphere. The next place that we are going to take a look at is the desert temple that I built. This is another build that I haven't had much chance to come back to since I finished it, and I do have a couple of ideas for things that I want to do in this area and might get back to it in the future. The interior of this build was the first time that I really started using a lot of the mangrove blocks, and I think that they go really well with the mud blocks. But if we take this staircase and go down, we will end up in a central room that has 4 hallways that lead away from it. One thing that I tried with this build was adding a few little traps to make it a little bit more interesting. Behind this trapdoor is the lever that will activate the first trap, and if we switch it on, you can see these blocks drop down, and then we have these dispensers, which would be able to shoot out arrows if there were any arrows in them. But when I did the episode where I built this, I used up all of the arrows filming the last part of that episode. And if we go down the stairs here, we'll be able to get down to the next level, and these blocks here are waterlogged mangrove roots, and I think they worked out pretty well. This room is the lava room, and you'll see that there are a bunch of dispensers here with lava buckets. And the idea is when the trap is activated, all of the lava will come out and fill in the floor. But if you are on the wrong side of this room when it starts filling up with lava, there is a way to get across with these pillars here, and you just have to be able to navigate it without getting hit by any of the lava that would start coming down from the ceiling. But we have now reached the primary staircase that will take us to the main room. And in this room, we have this walkway that leads all the way down to the very end, and along the outside we have these outer walls. And one way to create a little bit of a space where you can't really tell how deep it is unless you are really looking is to fill in the space with black concrete, or in this case, black wool. The final trap that I had set up involved a book on this lectern, and when you took the book off, it would activate the trap, causing all of these lights to turn on in succession, and when they reached the top, a bunch of TNT would start dropping out of these spots here in the archway. And the mechanism was set up so that the TNT would drop down, and when it reached about this point level with the walkway, that's when it would explode. So I've placed a book on here, and we'll see these lights slowly turn off, and then we'll be able to turn it on by taking the book off again. If we take the book, you'll hear the piston trigger, and then these lights will start to turn on. Eventually, I think, if the timings all work correctly. There we are. There's the first one, and then the second one, and so on. And then as soon as the last one reaches the top, then that's when the TNT would start to drop down. But I think all of the TNT has been used up, so nothing's going to drop down. And that is the Desert Temple. But now let's head to the city where all of the farms are located. At the moment, it doesn't look like much of a city because a lot of the buildings have not yet been built. So far, I have been working on getting the farms built that will help me get the resources that I'll need to build the rest of the city. For example, this one houses our bamboo farm as well as the smelter, and the bamboo farm is primarily used to run the smelter. This building is my wool farm, and then along here we have a bunch of different armor trims that were collected during a live stream, and we've got some of the subscribers who are watching and we're helping to participate in that process. Over on this side, we have the cactus farm, which is very efficient. And in the center, we have our mob farm, which produces all of the gunpowder and bones that we need. And then each of these towers has a sugarcane farm in its base, and we can access the farm by standing on these pressure plates. We can see they're producing quite a bit of sugarcane. Over on this side, we have our 2 most recent builds. So this building is standing on top of our storage room, and this building over here is for getting warp stem. From up here on the mob farm, we can get a pretty good view of this area, and there's a lot of space that we have to work with. Eventually, what I want to be able to do is fill in all of these open spaces with buildings so that it does feel like a city and not just a collection of buildings. And that's the world as it stands at the 5,000 day mark. In the description down below, you will find a link to the Patreon page, which will have access to the world download and instructions on how to do it. I would also like to thank everyone who has subscribed in the last couple of months. There have been many, as well as those who have been watching for a long time. All of your comments and likes are appreciated, and I am super excited to share with you more builds and more videos in the future. But until then, if you enjoyed today's video, please leave a like. If you want to see more, please subscribe. And until next time, see ya later.